Hi friends, so I took my expensive phone for a dip in the kitchen sink the other day, and it's still recovering. Hopefully this will work out. I think I'm going to have to buy another phone. And I love these Huawei phones, particularly since the CIA and Google and all of that do not like them. But anyway, it's sort of recovering, but I think I'm going to have to get another phone, sadly. Anyway, I wanted to, I've been off for a few days, and I've been away for a few days. So the thing I wanted to talk about, which was something that I wanted to talk about a few days ago, was something I saw recently about Julian Assange, and it was sent to me by somebody in Real Progressives. It was from the Canary. Judge rulings throw huge spanner into U.S. extradition proceedings against Assange, and that was from the 31st of July 2019, and it was by Tom Coburg. A U.S. judge has ruled that WikiLeaks was fully entitled to publish the Democratic National Congress DNC emails, which means no law was broken. The rule is highly significant as it would impact upon the U.S. extradition proceedings against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, as well as the ongoing imprisonment of whistleblower Chelsea Manning. On the 30th of July, federal judge John G. Kirtle ruled on a case brought against WikiLeaks and other parties in regard to the alleged hacking of the DNC emails, and concluded that, quote, if WikiLeaks could be held liable for publishing documents concerning the DNC's political, financial, and voter engagement strategies simply because the DNC labels them secret and trade secrets, then so could any newspaper or other media outlet. In other words, if WikiLeaks is subject to prosecution, then every media outlet in the world would be. The judge argued that the First Amendment prevents such liability in the same way it would preclude liability for press outlets that publish materials of public interest, despite defects in the way the materials were obtained, so long as the disseminator did not participate in any wrongdoing in obtaining the materials in the first place. Significantly, the judge added that it's not criminal to solicit or, quote, welcome stolen documents, and how a person is entitled to publish stolen documents that the publisher requested from a source, so long as the publisher did not participate in the theft. They're trying to pin that on Julian Assange, that what he was really doing was helping Chelsea Manning get a password so that she could protect her identity. That's really that's Julian Assange's participation in that. So, they're trying to pin that on him as well. Pin that on him that he was, in fact, actually the one that was hacking, or whatever. Anyway, so Jen Robinson, a member of Julian Assange's legal team, described the judge's ruling as, quote, as an, quote, important win for free speech, end quote. I can hardly believe that this has actually happened, because I would have thought that any participation by any U.S. judge in this case would be probably highly tainted and questionable, and so I'm surprised that this has happened, and surprised and sort of in some ways sort of delighted. I don't know if this is going to be like some one-off thing, or that they're going to overturn that judge or assassinate him. I don't know, but anyway, I'm joking about the assassination, kind of. Anyway, so Jen Robinson said on her Twitter thing, an important win for free speech. We have won our motion to dismiss for WikiLeaks in the DNC lawsuit against Assange, WikiLeaks et al. Over the 2016 U.S. election publications on First Amendment grounds. The full judgment, and she gives key passages. So you can check out Jen Robinson on Twitter at SUIGENERISJEN. So that's her Twitter account. And U.S. WikiLeaks lawyer Joshua Drattel said he was very gratified with the result, which reaffirms First Amendment principles that apply to journalists across the board, whether they work for large institutions or small independent operations. Prior to the ruling, the American Civil Liberties Union was party to a briefing to the court. The ACLU summarized some of the legal precedents listed in the briefing. For example, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is a legal principle articulated most clearly in the 2001 Supreme Court decision Bartnicki versus Vopper, and in a bedrock protection for the press. and is a bedrock protection for the press. It is particularly important for national security reporters who often rely on information that is legally required by a source in publishing stories of considerable public concern. Indeed, this principle animated the court's famous Pentagon Papers decision protecting the right to publish sources based on a secret government account of official misconduct during the origins of the Vietnam War. The briefing also referenced revelations of the CIA's Bush-era torture program were based in part on leaks by whistleblowers throughout government. So too were stories exposing sweeping NSA surveillance programs, stories for which several newspapers won Pulitzer Prizes in 2005 and 2014. It added, likewise, much of the reporting on Watergate relied on anonymous sources, divulging government secrets. Mark Felt, the deputy director of the FBI and the most famous Watergate source, nicknamed Deep Throat, took extensive steps to conceal his communication with the press because his leaks were under active investigation. Furthermore, an anonymous source sent more than 2.6 terabytes of encrypted information to a German newspaper and a U.S. investigative journalism nonprofit known as the Panama Papers. These internal files of the now defunct Panamanian law firm detailed a transnational tax evasion scheme developed for wealthy clients around the world. The disclosure of the files sparked public debate, and multiple proposals for legal reform. The ACLU concluded a ruling against WikiLeaks that narrowed this First Amendment protection could jeopardize the well-established legal framework that made these stories possible, and that is crucial to ensuring that the public has the information it needs to hold powerful actors to account. The judge's ruling could therefore have huge implications for U.S. extradition proceedings against Assange. Greg Barnes, a barrister and longtime advisor to the Assange campaign, told The Canary, the court, in dismissing the case, found that the First Amendment protected WikiLeaks' right to publish legally secured, private or classified documents of public interest. Applying the same First Amendment standard was used in justifying the New York Times publication of the Pentagon Papers. The right exists so long as the publisher does not join in any illegal acts that the source may have committed to obtain the information. But that doesn't include common journalistic practices such as requesting or soliciting documents or actively collaborating with the source. So this case is important in reinstating what is and is not protected under the First Amendment. But does it have implications for the extradition hearing? Well, it certainly helps to remind the courts in the UK that the First Amendment protection is very broad. Assange is understood to be ill while Manning is incarcerated for refusing to provide further information about her role as a WikiLeaks source. With consideration of this latest ruling, both should be immediately released from their respective prisons. Okay, so I read all of that because I thought, there's no really extraneous information there, so I hope you don't mind that I just read all of that Canary article from the 31st of January, and it's titled, Judge's Ruling Throws Huge Banner into U.S. Extradition Proceedings Against Assange by Tom Coburg. So, yes, in a fair world, in another universe where everything is actually fair, and it's not this universe, certainly not on this planet, both Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning would be released from prison. They would be both compensated, and they would be hailed as heroes. That's in a real proper universe. But even in Australia here, when I talk to politicians, in fact, they have no regard, they have no concept, or at least they're feigning this idea, they're feigning this impression to me or to the public. They're sort of giving this impression that they don't have much to say. Basically, they don't really have anything to say to support him, and even the Greens Party here. None of them really, except for maybe Peter Wilson, and the now he's not a member, he's not a senator anymore, but Scott Ludlam, he's another one that supported Julian Assange, but he's now not in the Green Party. But I will just read you a little bit from this article, which I saw and it's basically from an Australian publication, and it's sort of like what I've been saying in past videos about the complete lack of support by Australian politicians in all of the different parties, except for, say, Rex Patrick. He's in the Nick Xenophon party. He's actually spoken out for Julian Assange and for press freedoms. But even when the ABC when the ABC was raided by the Australian Federal Police for files on the Afghan files, which was exposing Australian military crimes in Afghanistan, even during that time, even though the press was sort of saying, well, this is outrageous, and the Murdoch press, and even when there were various politicians saying that this was unacceptable, they still did not include Assange and what's happening to Assange into that equation, even though it's exactly the same. It's just on a much bigger scale. The Afghan files had a source, and the ABC accepted that information, and they exposed that information for the public to see, expose war crimes by the Australian military, and, really, what's the difference? There is no difference, and yet they pretend as if Julian Assange is just a completely separate case and that it has nothing to do with Australia, and they've just completely abandoned him. Anyway, the World Socialist website, an article on the 3rd of August 2019 by Mike Head, it's titled, "Despite briefing by Julian Assange's lawyer, Australian politicians still refuse to defend him." I mean, I hate to say, I try to sort of turn my anger into, when I see this sort of injustice, turn my anger into sort of like something positive, like, say, doing these sort of things I don't do this, I do this for myself as a cathartic sort of exercise, my Faint Signals from Vega channel, and also hopefully just trying to add to the to the voices, because there's so few voices actually now. There's independent journalists, but we need to spread that journalism because it's not being spread. It's certainly not being spread by the algorithms that are clamping down and causing censorship on Google and all those different social media platforms, Facebook, etc., who are just arms of the military-industrial complex, the national security state and surveillance state, etc. They're not being spread in that manner. So it's up to us it's up to the public, really, to spread this news and this important independent journalism, like Avi Martin's journalism and Max Blumenthal and the Grey Zone and all of that. Those sort of, and the Mint Press News and the Black Agenda Report. That's another great one that I keep forgetting to mention. I'd mentioned it before, but the Black Agenda Report, with the numerous writers there, like Margaret Kimberley, once Bruce Dixon, who has just recently died. He was great, and Ajama Baraka, Danny Hapthong, who's actually written a book recently. I can't recall the title. I think it's American Exceptionalism and something else. But anyway, they're all really great writers. So check that out. But anyway, this World Socialist Web article, it says here, this week has provided an important experience by those hoping that stepped-up lobbying of parliamentary leaders would produce a shift in the Australian establishment's refusal to oppose the US-led persecution of Julian Assange, an Australian citizen. On Wednesday, Assange London-based lawyer Jennifer Robinson had meetings in Canberra with politicians, including a working dinner with Labor Party leader Anthony Albanese. Now, Anthony Albanese is actually sort of is supposed to be more lefty than Bill Shorten, who was the last leader of the Labor Party. And these are the two main parties that get all the attention from the press, are the Labor Party and the Coalition. And the Coalition right now is in government, and the Coalition is a full-on right-wing that just does everything that the national security state in the United States wants them to do. And there's really not much, and also just is incredibly right-wing, racist, xenophobic, in a really kind of in a Trumpian sort of way. And the Labor Party is not that much different in a way, except they're just like in some ways, not as bad as the Democratic Party in the United States, who is it's just two wings of the same bird in that circumstance. And the Labor Party, sadly, the Australian Labor Party is becoming more and more that way. They're becoming more and more sort of problematic, and sort of they have racist policies and all of that. And they when the US asks them to do something, they say, how high do I jump for you? It's really like that. So Anthony Albanese, he might be on the left of the party, but he's certainly the left, more of a left leader, but he certainly, to me, doesn't really demonstrate that at all. And I'm going to talk about in another video about this, the unemployment benefits that's supposed to socially support anybody who's suffering from the institutionalized unemployment that is in our society, in our Australia, and has been for a while. And it's absolutely appalling. I'm going to how much they expect people to live on, even though they know it's not possible for anybody to live on that amount. So I'm going to talk about that because the Labor Party, the Federal Labor Party, is as bad in addressing that as the coalition, the ones that are in government right now, the right-wing party. Anyway, so on Wednesday, Assange's London-based lawyer Jennifer Robinson had meetings in Canberra with politicians, including a working dinner with Labor leader Anthony Albanese. It followed a 10-minute private meeting the previous week between Albanese and Assange's father, John Shipton. Inside Parliament House, Robinson gave a detailed briefing to about 30 members of Parliament and staff members, explaining in the clearest possible terms what is at stake for media, freedom and democratic rights in the Trump administration's Espionage Act charges against the WikiLeaks founder. The briefing reportedly included MPs from the ruling Liberal National Coalition, as well as Labor Greens and quote-unquote crossbenchers. As Robinson explained, the vendetta against Assange began in 2010 when WikiLeaks published the devastating material leaked by the courageous whistleblower Chelsea Manning. The exposures included the infamous collateral murder video, 90,000 incriminating reports on the US-led invasion of Afghanistan and 400,000 on the Iraq War, 800 Guantanamo Bay detainee assessment briefs, and 250,000 secret US State Department cables revealing illegal killings, coup plots, regime change operations, and mass surveillance. This week's intensive efforts in Canberra, however, failed to convince any of the politicians to oppose the Trump administration's application to extradite the WikiLeaks founder to face charges that could see him jailed for life or even executed for revealing these US crimes. Despite agreeing to a meal with Robinson at a Canberra restaurant, Anthony Albanese issued no media release after the event and refused to respond to a request by the World Socialist Web for any comment. Labor's shadow Attorney General Mark Dreyfus, who met Robinson separately, continued to back the operation to railroad Assange into a US prison. Quote, Mr. Assange's detention and any legal proceedings are a matter of current consideration in accordance with the British justice system, and it would be inappropriate to comment while that process is underway, end quote, Dreyfus said. Well, that's a major cop-out. And this is what they all do. When you ring them up, they just have flat catchers on the phone who pretend to not know anything, or they actually don't know anything. And that's what you get over and over again. I've rung them numerous times over the years, and that's what you get. You get this sort of nonsense. Assange's treatment by the, quote, British justice system, end quote, has been a legal charade, clearly driven by the political agenda of the UK and US governments. Assange was legally dragged out of London's Ecuadorian embassy, where he was granted political asylum in 2012 and rapidly sentenced to 50 weeks imprisonment on minor bail charges, followed by the British government's almost instant authorization of the US extradition application. Anthony Albanese and Dreyfus remain lockstep with the government of Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Morrison's office informed the media on Wednesday that he would not raise the issue of Assange when he hosts US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Defense Secretary Mike Esper at annual Australia-United States Ministerial, that's AUSMIN, talks in Sydney this weekend. Morrison took the same position in June. By the way, expect that there'll be a whole lot of anti-Chinese propaganda coming out after their meetings. It's just like clockwork, when these awful US imperialist white supremacist warmongers come over to Australia to meet with our politicians here, it's just sort of like clockwork. You just know whatever they do next is something that's been sort of requested, in quotes, by these people, these awful sort of representatives of US empire. Morrison took the same position in June when he refused to mention Assange's plight when he met with US President Donald Trump at the G20 summit in Osaka. See, they just know. You know who your masters are, the ones that you know you're not supposed to criticize, that kind of thing. During her Parliament House briefing, Robinson distributed a fact sheet that demonstrated that the US was seeking to prosecute Assange for, quote, regular journalistic activity, end quote. She warned, quote, Mr. Assange is at great risk of human rights abuses should he be extradited to the US. Therefore, urgent political representations are highly appropriate and necessary in this matter, given Australia's human rights obligations, end quote. Well, when you see the way our government treats asylum seekers here, asylum seekers that are fleeing our imperialist wars, then it's no surprise that, we don't uphold any sort of real human rights obligations in relation to them, to those asylum seekers who are fleeing our Western imperialist wars. We just whack them in these, what you could refer to as Australia's Guantanamo Bay. We whack them in offshore detention centres where they're left to rot. They have no idea when they're going to be able to be freed. So it's this psychological torture for them. And it's physical torture because they never ever get out of this compound. They're treated really badly by some of these Serco. Serco is part, I think, has got, it has a lot to do with the private prisons here in Australia. See, that's what I mean when I say it's turning into the US situation, like the private prison system is just a money-making venture. And they're not interested in anything that's going to improve situations for people, any sort of social equality, because they get the benefits of that. People end up in prison for ridiculous things, non-violent offences, etc. And they're also, not only is Serco, from what I understand, Serco is still involved in this Guantanamo, this Australia's Guantanamo, Manus Island, Christmas Island, etc., where these poor asylum seekers and their children are just left there, basically rotting away. It's just appalling. I can't stand it. It's just appalling the way we're treating these people. And some people have killed themselves. Our children are self-harming. I mean, I never thought I would see the day when Australia would become so mean-spirited. And somebody, it takes people to vote in these governments too. I realise that the Labor Party, this is what happens when you have a poor alternative and two major parties seem to be dominating the political landscape. You end up with, you get a Trumpian sort of effect, which is people voting for the party who they think are going to give them more jobs because they're struggling financially, and a lot of Australians have a massive personal debt now. And so they think that, well, the Labor Party isn't doing much, so let's try this. And they voted them in. They voted them in again, like they were. And these people, the right-wing sort of coalition government, has absolutely no interest in helping ordinary Australians. I do not know why people vote against their best interests. There are, we at least have a preferential voting system, which the US does not have. So, we can actually vote for other people here in Australia. Other parties here in Australia. So, we don't have to vote really for these two major parties and the people in them if they're if they've got racist policies and if they've abandoned unemployed people on this awful New Start, which is far less than what is survivable, and all this sort of thing. And it's just joining in on these imperialist wars, without any question, without any discussion. Why on earth, but both these parties, the Labor Party is a neoliberal party and the Coalition is a neoconservative party, and they have really, the federal, ones have little to no interest really in changing much, So anyway, when I see, of course, if they don't care about these desperate asylum seekers who had to flee their countries, they're certainly not going to do anything about Julian Assange if the US is sort of insisting, is basically telling them what to do. They just do whatever the US does. Anyway, Jennifer Robinson, the lawyer's exposure of the legal travesty was underscored on the same day when a US judge dismissed a Democratic National Committee civil lawsuit against Assange, ruling unequivocally that WikiLeaks' publication of leaks was essential journalistic activity protected by the US Constitution's First Amendment. Yet none of the Australian MPs who attended Robinson's briefing made a public comment, and the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and the corporate media largely blacked out the event and the lack of any response. You see, this is the situation in Australia. The silence included Greens Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, who co-sponsored the Parliament House briefing with Labor backbench MP Susan Templeman. I mean, you know what I'm saying? After the briefing, Whish-Wilson stood beside Robinson at a media conference and said Morrison, quote, must raise the issue of Assange with Pompeo and Esper. He must be brought home, Whish-Wilson stated. But neither Whish-Wilson nor Templeman issued any statement of support for Assange or any call for the government to intervene. Questioned by the WSWS, Whish-Wilson's spokesperson said the Greens were being, quote, low-key, end quote, because, quote, any mention of Assange immediately polarizes people, end quote. Oh my God, like, that is just playing into the propaganda that's been put out, the smear campaigns by not only politicians, including the ones in Australia like Penny Wong and Tanya Plibersek, people like that. Tanya Plibersek has been smearing him terribly. But it's just playing, and the mainstream media has been smearing him. It's just like people are polarized. And that's, I think in some ways, that's people don't know what's going on. That's more the case. They're not really polarized. They don't really know what's going on because we have no fourth estate to speak of in Australia. We really do not. It's worse than in the United States here as far as the fourth estate goes, a functioning fourth estate. It's worse here, and that's saying something. The ABC is just so frightened of losing funding by either government, but the current government, that they're just becoming more and more moving further to the right. And I mean, this is the state of things now. So even the Greens, who claim to be sort of different from these major parties, they're not really. They're just as they do what the US wants them to as well. They're all gutless, really. Gutless, and no offense to invertebrates, but spineless, morally spineless. The lot of them, really. Rex Patrick has been outspoken, but he's been kind of quiet, I think, lately. He said some stuff. I mean, that doesn't even make sense. The Greens were being low-key because of any mention of Assange immediately polarizes people. People need to know what's going on, and they don't. So that's a terrible. That is just a made-up excuse. That's another sort of just a really, really poor excuse that actually they know doesn't mean anything, doesn't make any sense. It goes on. The response points to concerns within the Parliament over saying anything that could contribute to growing popular opposition to Trump administration's extradition bid and the Australian political establishment's willing complicity in it. The silence of the MPs is inextricably tied to their commitment to the Australian ruling elite's military and strategic alliance with the US. Exactly. But I have to say, I forgot to mention that there have been a couple of Matilda articles about Assange, I think. So I'm not saying that everybody is silent about it in the mainstream media, although they're not really the mainstream media, Matilda, but there have been a couple of people. But basically, it's been really, really, really sad. How much smearing has been going on, and it's just a disgrace. You know my disgust. If you've watched this channel, you know how disgusted I am with all of this. It's just disgusting. Anyway, I mean, if Julian Assange ever is prevented from being extradited, it won't be with the help of any of these politicians. It'll be because of a grassroots movement. That's why we all need to talk about this issue, and we all need to highlight this issue for people who don't know anything, so that people will start speaking out, because you cannot leave this up to politicians in Australia. They're useless. They're worse than useless. They're actually helping it along, helping this happen. And if he goes to the US, if he's extradited, that'll be the end of him. They'll torture him. They'll throw him in a solitary confinement for the rest of his life, and he'll probably die not long after he gets there, because his health is already poor. From 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy and now in Belmarsh prison, one of the harshest prisons in the UK. He shouldn't be in any prison. When Albanese was asked, will he be bringing up the issue, and he was supposed to be meeting with Pompeo and Esper, he reiterated Labor's long-standing adherence to the US alliance as a key pillar of the party's foreign policy. You see, so our foreign policy, there's Nandi, he's got his Bird Be Safe collar on. No, we don't like to dress up our cats. Albanese, his idea of our foreign policy is the same as the US foreign policy. We just trot along. We're a vassal state. We're a US lackey. We just trot along with whatever the US wants us to do. I mean, he's literally actually said that. There's no embarrassment there. There's no questioning what they're doing. The now 12, I think, wars. Obama expanded 2 to 7. Now it's up to 12 plus or something. It's sort of all these wars that have nothing to do with defending anybody's country. They're just imperialist, white supremacist wars, and we're involved in it. From Australia's part in it, we're involved in it. And we don't question anything, and we don't bring it up in the media. It's never discussed in the media. It's never ever debated. It's a non-issue what we're doing. It's truly astounding. I cannot believe the Australia this has become. It's not even talked about even. It's just accepted. It's normalized, and most people don't even realize how many wars we're involved in now, and what the US is doing. So when you bring this up with people, with people and just everyday people in Australia, they think you're a conspiracy theorist. When you talk about Julian Assange, or you talk about these US imperialist wars, or you talk about Russiagate, a lot of people think that Putin, that Trump is a Manchurian candidate of Putin's. I mean, that's how far gone we are here. That's what I mean. We have no fourth estate to speak of. Anyway, I won't read the rest of this, but I'll just quickly say, give you an idea of the Greens Party, where they're at on this issue. Together with the coalition, Labor and the Greens are intent also on covering up their own direct role from the beginning in supporting the persecution of Assange, first by the Obama administration and now Trump's White House. The Greens-backed Labor government of Julia Gillard laid the path for every Australian government since. Prime Minister Gillard denounced WikiLeaks' publication of secret documents as quote-unquote illegal and sought to help US agencies prosecute Assange, even as American politicians and sections of the media were calling for his assassination. Moreover, in 2012, the Greens supported moves to facilitate Assange's extradition to the US if he managed to get back to Australia. I mean, the Greens, the Australian Greens, they voted for Labor government amendments to Australia's extradition legislation, permitting the government to override restrictions on... Sorry about the wind. I thought I'd do it outside just for a change because it's very nice out here, but now the wind has kind of come up, but this should be finished soon. Okay, so they voted for Labor government amendments to Australia's extradition legislation, permitting the government to override restrictions on extraditing people accused of quote-unquote political offences against foreign governments. This week's events confirmed that the Australian government will take action to defend Assange only if it is compelled to do so by a mass movement of the working class. The immense power of the working class internationally must be mobilised to secure the release of both Assange and Manning and defend all democratic rights. This is the purpose of the call issued by the World Socialist website for the formation of a global defence committee. I don't know, I'm not sure what that is, so I'm not endorsing it because I don't know what it is, but they're right about a mass mobilisation internationally. That is the only thing that is going to save Assange. That's the only thing that's going to address imperialist wars, these awful Western imperialist wars that go on unabated and expand, and the next one will be Iran, and they're trying to invade Venezuela, the US empire. So, without some sort of an anti-war, anti-imperialist movement, there will be no end to these normalized wars that are killing millions of people. So we have to all speak out. So start a blog, start a podcast, get involved locally with groups, meeting up with groups, and let's mobilize so that we can do something, because nothing is going to happen with these politicians. They're going to go on and just do whatever the US wants. They're gutless. They have no spine, no offense to invertebrates. And, so we all of us have to do something. And inevitably, we're the ones that vote these people in. Like, somebody voted in this awful government we have. Like, I thought I was going to have a panic attack when I saw Scott Morrison get in it again. We weren't expecting that. Not that I think the Labor Party, I don't think the Labor Party is much better, but they're better than those people. You know, I prefer, I don't really believe politicians are going to be the people, they're going to be the last people to save the planet or to change anything. It's really us. It's up to us, you and I. So let's do something and spread out this information and start supporting Julian Assange, because it's not just about him, and it's not about whether you like him or you don't like him. It's about press freedom, and without press freedom, we're completely lost. As you can see, we're in a dire situation in Australia. Dire, because we don't have any real fourth estate here. Okay, well, thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the subscribe button and the notifications bell, and hit the like button if you like the content. Please leave comments if you wish. I always enjoy your comments. I hope that I don't have to buy a new phone. I think I probably will, because the screen has got all stripes across it. I'm not even sure if this is going to turn out, but anyway, unfortunately, my poor phone, I think, is probably it's not going to be very good for taking photos and things if I can't even see what I'm recording or whatever. But anyway, that's how it goes. So anyway, hopefully I can use this damaged phone until I get another Huawei. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Paint Signals from Vega, and Nandi says bye-bye too in the background there. He's having a little... They love getting into my videos, whether it's sitting in the back or sitting on my lap, and I think they just like being near me, really. Sweet Nandi. Okay, so thanks for watching. Bye for now.